Hello, my name is Rob, and welcome to another episode of Impossible Mission, the podcast stroke video series from the YouTube, which talks about all things video games, whether it's relevant or whether it isn't, and it just interests us. Either way, click on the like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or if you are subscribing on a podcast provider, please do share us and rate us, and just get involved with the discussion, really, is the fundamental thing there.
Yeah, because it is a discussion. I mean, we have our own opinions, but we want to hear what everyone else thinks as well on the stuff we're talking about.
Yes, slightly different recording for this episode, for obvious reasons. The world is a little bit scary right now. Yeah,
if I see anybody grey-faced and groaning, I am going to be barricading myself.
Yes. So the coronavirus has made it, social distancing is absolutely necessary, so we're just exhibiting that and recording this remotely, like every other podcast is right now.
Well, all I can say is, from my perspective, being a carer in my other role, I've been social distancing myself for 10 years already, so this is nothing new to me.
Okay, there's going to be 2 episodes in 1 week for this one.
Yes.
Because it's an important week as far as the consoles go. Last time out we talked about the Xbox One.
Yep.
This time, the PlayStation 5 has had a big old dump of information.
Yeah.
First things first, did you watch the live stream of Mark Cerny going a deep dive on the PlayStation 5's innards?
Unfortunately, I didn't manage to catch hold of it.
I did watch it, but at the same time, I'm not sure I did watch it because it may have been the most boring thing I've ever seen in my life.
That kind of comes back to, remember we were talking about E3 and the whole point of E3 being, and I said, it's basically a trade show. It's a tech demonstration. That's all it is. Look what our console can do.
There's a degree of truth to what you're saying there, but at the same time, this was initially intended to be put out at Games Developers Conference. Its audience, this 52-minute video's audience was games developers.
Yeah, and from what I've read, because I've done a lot of reading about it, and from what I've read, it is going to be developer-friendly. I mean, they're not
everybody else unfriendly, though.
Well, I don't know. See, this is the thing. If you're familiar with the PS4 architecture, because I think the problem child was the PS3 when they were trying to do something different, and with the PS4, they kind of went back to the drawing board and said, okay, we need to be more friendly to the developers, and they're kind of continuing with that with this new spec sheet they've put out.
Well, there's a aspect of let's just call it an elaborate PowerPoint presentation, because that's what Mark Cerny did. He has no stage appeal or sex appeal, or he's very, very clever. He's a genius at designing these machines, in fact. But as far as doing that sort of delivery, it was bad. He reminded me of university when there was a lecturer. He did media ethics. I think it was like Thursday, 6 till 8 o'clock. And he didn't have a presentation. He didn't do anything. He just talked to us about media ethics for 2 hours.
Yeah.
I fell asleep through a few of those lectures, and I think he's pretty much cut from that cloth.
Yeah. Reminds me of my old paleontology lecturer when I was at uni. That was, I fell asleep in the lecture hall and I snore really loud.
Yeah, I mean, when you wake up in a lecture and everybody's staring at you, you think, hang on, is this a dream? Am I naked? You are naked. What's going on here?
But anyway, yes. Back to the PS5.
But the PS5 is what we're talking about today.
Yeah, I have heard about and I have read about the very dull presentation. I did see somebody mention, right, that if they really wanted to jazz up the presentation and actually make it more interesting, give it more character, what they should have done, regardless of how much cash it cost, hire Jeff Goldblum to do the presentation.
Well, that's just being hypothetical. Anyway, let's just go through the specs.
Yes.
The big bullet points. You mentioned in there the development of the PlayStation 4 was kind of going back to ground zero.
Yeah.
Or returning to origins, really.
Yeah.
There's a bit there was a bit in the conference where he said PlayStation 1, I can't remember the exact figures, but PlayStation 1, it was 1 to 2 months for developers to get used to the coding for a PlayStation game. PlayStation 2, I think it was it went up anyway. PlayStation 3, it was 6 months to a year for developers to get used to it. PlayStation 4, it was 1 to 2 months. And PlayStation 5, it's under a month for people to be able to understand how to code or develop the game for it.
Yeah, part of the reason for that is because there's several reasons why that's the case. I think if you're looking at the hardware specifications, one of the reasons for that is I think it's the custom processor and the GPU. That, combined with the SSD, makes it easier for developers to code.
Let's just go through. I mean, I'm not going to go through the CPU because, frankly, it's incredibly nerdy. But the thing which has been getting a lot of attention because, as ever with these things, it's a console war. The Xbox Series X has 12.1 teraflops.
Yeah, this one has 10.28, was it?
10.28. And there's a bit in the conference, let's just call it for shorthand, it's easier.
Yeah.
He said teraflops isn't the only way to measure the power of a console.
Yeah, he's right.
And given some of the accounts of developers who say basically this is one of the most revolutionary designs of a console maybe ever, I'm inclined to agree. However, that's not the way that these things are measured as a consumer-facing spot, is it?
Well, no, the way that things are measured as a consumer is price. How much does it cost?
No, I mean, it's which is the most powerful machine, I mean. Well, that is one of the real hardcore fanboys. They really do fixate on that stuff.
Yeah, the real hardcore fanboys will focus on the teraflops, but I mean, for the average consumer, the way I look at it is I treat consoles in the same way I treat PCs. First, I look at what processor does it have, then I look at how much RAM it has. I don't even count teraflops. For me, teraflops don't even come into it. I'm looking at processor, RAM. I'm looking at what kind of graphical processor it's got. Those are the things I'm looking at. Teraflops don't mean anything to me. I don't care about the teraflops.
Oh, no, but it's like the console war. It's whatever has more of something is the better one.
Yeah.
That's all I'm getting at.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that's a very, it's a very, very, very nerdy way of looking at it. But, I mean, if you look at, just to go over the specs.
Just on the graphics, I want to illustrate a point.
Yeah.
12.1 is more than 10.28.
Yes, it is.
Obviously. But if you go back to the PlayStation 1, the initial PlayStation 4, it was 1.84 teraflops.
Yeah, and it's a massive increase.
That's an insane jump up.
Yeah, but this is the thing. I mean, we know technology is going to be advancing in leaps and bounds. But the thing is, having a graphical processor, having a really good... again, I'm going to break it down in terms of a PC, right? Just having a really good graphics card doesn't mean to say you're going to be able to run high-end graphics on your games. Because if your processor and your RAM can't support the graphics processor, then, there's pointless having that high-end graphics card. It's a common mistake that a lot of people who try and build their own PCs make, because they think that having a good graphics card is what is, the be-all and end-all, and forget about all the other things. This
is one of those things where optimization really matters.
Yeah.
And the development of the SSD seems to be very much tailored around that, but we'll get to that later.
The interesting thing for me about the graphics processor is that it's a custom-made one. It's not an off-the-shelf one. It's not one that you can apply to other things. It's custom-made for the PS5.
Yeah. I want to run through a few bits of spec.
Yeah.
It's got 16 gig of RAM.
Which is not bad.
The PlayStation 4 was 8, so it's double. I know that's not really saying much, but...
I would envision if that the 16 gig will be fine for now, but at some point they will push it to 32 or 64. If they do a pro version of the PS5...
I'd say 32. 64 is a bit much at this point in games development.
Yeah, but I would envision if they have a PS5 Pro, they would probably push that to 32 gig.
Yeah, I'd say that's quite comfortable. Memory bandwidth is 448 gigabytes, which is twice...
Yeah.
Well, it's probably more. I don't know. It's over twice the PlayStation 4.
Yeah. The CPU, it's a Zen 2 based CPU. It's an 8-core CPU as well, so...
that means nothing to me, I'll be perfectly frank.
Well, an octa-core CPU seems to be the standard. With it being a Zen 2 based one, I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether that's a good decision to make with this, but then again, apparently it's supposed to be better than what you get in normal PCs, so...
Yeah, and the thing which is bugging me is the internal storage. It's 825 gig, and admittedly the PlayStation 4 launched at 500.
Yeah.
But still, with games, some games being 50 gig, some games being 100 gig, that 825 gig is pretty bad.
Well...
But on that, they have announced that where you can plug in a external drive.
Yeah, it actually has an NVMe slot, which I am very surprised that they've included that.
Well, it's basically like a memory. I mean, the way that Xbox Series X is doing it, it's like Xbox Series X has a proprietary system, which means you have to buy their stuff to put in the machine, which means they can charge a premium. Which reminds me of the days, I think it was the PlayStation Vita, where you had to have their specific type of memory. I
was literally about to say exactly the same thing. It seems that Sony has learned from the mistake they made with the Vita, because if they hadn't done that with the Vita would have been a much bigger handheld console. It would have really challenged the 3DS in the handheld space, right?
Yeah.
But I think Sony have learned from that. So now you can just buy an off-the-shelf NVMe SSD card.
Well, it has to be a certain speed, but yeah.
Yeah, it has to be a certain speed, which isn't readily available now, but by the time the launch of the PS5 comes around, then they might actually be more readily available. And the fact that you can buy a third-party off-the-shelf one means that they're no longer being as kind of, holding on to it as tightly as they used to, which is, I think, a good thing for the consumer.
Yeah, so that's the specs.
And you can still use external USB hard drives, which have your PlayStation 4 games on, to actually play them on the PlayStation 5, which, the backwards compatibility kind of reminds me of, remember with the Xbox 360 and the Xbox One, the backwards compatibility for that they eventually came up with. If you had the game on the Xbox 360, you basically could get a code which you could download the game onto the Xbox One without paying.
You haven't really described what the backwards compatibility looks like with the PlayStation 5. All they said is basically like a legacy mode that allows you to play PlayStation 4 games.
The way I understood it from everything I read was that if it's on a hard drive, then you should be able to play it as long as it's like not a really early PlayStation 4 game. And
the top 100 they described it as, which asks the question by playtime. He described it.
Yeah.
Top 100 PlayStation 4 games by playtime, which it's going to be a lot of multiplayer stuff, isn't it? If that's the barometer they're using to measure this stuff.
Yeah, I know they haven't mentioned anything about PlayStation 1, 2, or 3 games as well.
Yeah, I think they should just be digital, frankly, like a digital library.
I think a digital library. But if you already own, I think they could take a leaf out of Microsoft's book and say, okay, if you've already got this game on disc, right, then put it in and it'll generate a code and you can download it for free because you already own it, right? So I think that would be a nice way of acknowledging that people who already own a massive library of games don't need to pay through the nose to play those games on the PlayStation 5.
Yeah, there's some things I want to bring up here, though. The main one, though, is this is really bad marketing from Sony.
Yes.
Whereas look at the Xbox, and it released like the console what it looked like first in a big bombastic nice trailer, and then it got all the nerdy stuff out of the way via articles, via bits and pieces after that. So there's something tangible there. There's something tangible that people who want an Xbox Series X can look forward to. They know what it looks like. They know what the console controller is. Whereas Sony have released a series of nerdy articles, and that's it.
Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but at the end of the day, Microsoft have basically taken the lead on the marketing with this round of console announcements, and when they've already released what it's going to look like and also released a spec sheet for it, you're not really playing for anything then.
No, but at the same time, Xbox are in a position now where all they need to do is start releasing trailers for games and the price and release date.
Yeah, whereas Sony aren't even in that position yet. I don't think a design for the PS5 has been finalised yet.
And honestly, I think when we were talking about sort of the sound thing, where they were figuring out what works, they were figuring out what hard drives are compatible, it doesn't sound like they're completely finished much. Well, they're finished a lot, but it's like...
This is my point. I think that it's a lot more finished than people think, but it's still an incomplete product. And you mentioned the sound, and I do want to talk about the sound, because the sound bit was really interesting. From a lot of the articles I read that focused on the audio side of things, the Tempest 3D audio technology that they've developed for this, it sounds pretty damn amazing, and it could potentially, if it's applied properly, it could revolutionize the whole aspect of VR gaming. Because if the PSVR can support like 50 pretty decent sound sources, right, in one go, then from what I've read, the Tempest engine can support hundreds. And not only can it support hundreds, it can do them with just a normal set of headphones.
Yeah, that is very good.
And that I think is the key thing. You don't need to buy... I mean, obviously, you'd need to buy an upgraded PSVR for the PS5, but...
Well, they've not announced that yet, but they will.
But you wouldn't need to buy a really high-end set of headphones to basically use, experience the audio side of things. Now, part of any game, part of any experience with video games is the sound, especially when you're playing horror games or something like that.
Any games, let's be fair, and that's not pigeonhole it to just horror.
But I mean, horror games in particular, because of the atmosphere that comes with the audio side of things. But any game, as you said, right? Now, imagine, because we've always said that one of the problems with the virtual reality games is that they're not as immersive as we want them to be.
Well, there's more problems in that, but...
Yeah, there's more problems than that. But that's one of the main problems. They're not as immersive as we want them to be. Now, you imagine, instead of having like 50 audio sources, you have literally hundreds, and you're being bombarded with all sorts of subtle noises and sounds from all sides, right? That's going to play a big part in your immersion into any game.
And that's fair, but as far as I'm concerned with this, something's only as good as its worst example.
Yeah, so that's absolutely right. I'm not trying to see. The thing is, I'm trying to play devil's advocate a little bit with Sony, because I know that they haven't really done a good job with their presentation of this, and so what I'm hopeful that it's going to be an interesting console. I'm hopeful that the backwards compatibility, I think, is a big thing.
Yes,
but I don't think it's the thing that's going to sell the console. No,
it's always the games, isn't it?
Yeah. And Ghost of Tsushima is one of the launch titles for the game. For the console.
No, it's on PS4. I got to be honest. My worry with Ghost of Tsushima is it's going to be another Souls-like game.
Yeah.
Which for a lot of people is fine, but at the same time, there's just as many people who don't like that as people who do.
Yeah. They have announced that there are other launch titles for it, but not a lot.
As far as I know, there's Godfall is a PS5 title, and I think World Rally Championship 9 is a PlayStation 5 title.
Yeah, which, I wouldn't say that was a great lineup. The biggest... No. See, the thing is, one of the biggest factors that's going to drive the sales of the PlayStation 5, in fact, of any console, for the average consumer, is how much does it cost?
Yeah, and people are basically deciding, press people, industry people are basically deciding that it's probably going to be $600 or £600.
No, I've seen $500. $500 is the maximum I've seen from a lot of the articles.
I've seen $600 quite a lot, but it's.
A lot of the articles I've seen have said $500, but that's based on no interruptions to production, right? No real issues, everything like that. But given the state of the world right now,
I think RRP is going to be £500, but I think both are going to be subject to problems. Remember the Wii, where it was almost impossible to get for about 6 months?
Yeah.
I think they're going to both have that problem.
Yeah, it's the age-old thing as well. Don't buy a console for the first 6 months.
Well, yes, but at the same time, I think other things are causing that to be just normal. It's going to be very, 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 very hard.
No, I'm just saying that for the first 6 months of any console, it's going to run into all sorts of bugs and problems and stuff like that. Stuff that they didn't envision, because at the end of the day, they don't do exhaustive testing. They can't. It wouldn't be cost efficient for any console manufacturer to do exhaustive testing. So,
well, they can test.
They're not going to have somebody doing like a 72-hour gaming session on the console, are they?
They can test, but they can't test in a way that thousands or millions of people owning a console in their homes can test.
Exactly. I mean, remember when the Xbox 360 came out, and all of a sudden, within the first 6 months, there were red rings of death everywhere.
Yeah.
Any console launch is going to have issues like that. I was surprised with the PlayStation 4 that it didn't have as many issues as I thought it was going to have.
No, I mean, I didn't have to replace my PlayStation 4 at all. Although, admittedly, the controller is as good as useless now. How I have to basically recharge it every day.
Yeah. I think the biggest problems facing both Sony and Microsoft with the launch of these consoles, regardless of what the launch titles are, and regardless of how much it costs, they're up against a console that is literally kicking their asses right now.
Yeah, but the thing is, at this point, we'll revisit the consoles later when there's more to talk about, when it's like software rather than hardware. But in step one of next gen watch of what these consoles are or what they're going to be, how are you feeling about the tech, about PlayStation and Xbox Series X? How do you think how do you think the land lies?
Well, I think that Microsoft have, on paper, the more powerful console, right? I think on paper, Microsoft do have the more powerful console, but I think in terms of actually developing games for the console, I think Sony have the advantage on that front. I think developers, because Sony are basically, with the PS5, they're basically just building on the PlayStation 4. They're not going back to the drawing board and re-envisioning things. And it's kind of similar with Microsoft, except with it being much more high-end specifications and things like that. There's going to be a bit more pressure on the developers, but the actual, I think the actual turnaround for games, you've said, is 1 to 2 months on the PlayStation 5. That's what they envision.
I understanding the code, it's under a month for PlayStation 5.
Yeah. Understanding the code for the Series X,
I doubt they're going to release that information. It was just a bullet point to make it sound cool for PlayStation 5.
Yeah.
Prior to that, that's not the sort of information that was public knowledge.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just going on the basis of the tech specifications, because the Series X is basically a PC, right?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what the form factor is going to be like for PlayStation 5.
Yeah, but the Series X is basically a PC, but it's also a proprietary operating system, which means it isn't a PC.
I'll be honest, I know they haven't released the form factor for the PlayStation 5. I think they're going to have to follow suit because of how powerful these things and how much heat they're going to kick off.
Yeah.
I don't think you can have it as sort of like... Because they are sort of... All these consoles basically, form factor-wise, go all the way back to sort of the Betamax player and the VHS player.
Yeah.
And I don't think it could continue that sort of idea of having that sort of device under the TV. I think it has to evolve into a bigger, different form factor, and I think Xbox will be the leader on that, and I think the PlayStation 5 will have to follow suit. I think it might come into problems if it's just another like DVD player under the TV sort of design.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. See, the only way that Sony could make the DVD player type design or the VHS player type design work in terms of the heat dissipation, I think, would be if they used a really good liquid cooling system, right?
Yeah, but I still think that's going to rise the costs, isn't it?
Yeah, that's going to drive the cost up. If they're planning on using just fans and thermal pads and things like that, and just normal heat dissipation there to keep the cost down, then they're going to have to build it so that it's well ventilated.
Which means tower sort of design.
Exactly. And if they're building it as a tower, then you remember ages ago I said, right, there's going to come a time when they're all just basically PCs.
Mm-hmm.
And I said it's probably going to be the next console generation. I said this last year, I think it was.
Yeah.
Before any announcement. They have to. They basically have to follow. I said PCs are basically one, and the next consoles are basically going to be PCs. And if Sony do adopt the tower form factor, then I'm basically right, aren't I? I called it.
Yeah. It'd be interesting, I mean, it's a natural evolution of an industry.
Yeah, but I would... See, I'm going to make this prediction now, right? I'm just throwing this out there. Another off the top of my head, crazy Rob prediction. I'll basically be like the soothsayer in the Monty Python movie, going sooth.
Okay, soothsayer.
I predict that if there is another console generation, and I'm not sure if there is going to be, right?
If there is, they're not going to be the same sort of format as they are now. It's going to be much more digital leaning.
Yeah, I reckon that if there is another console generation, and it's a big if, right? If there is another console generation, it will basically just be Nintendo. Microsoft and Sony will basically stop making consoles, and everything will be PC-based.
I wouldn't say PC-based. Everything will be streaming-based.
Well, streaming-based, PC-based, but it will all run on your home computer. You won't need a console anymore. It'll all be digital, as you said, right? So you'll have like a Netflix of games or something like that. But what you'll have, it'll be like Netflix and Amazon Prime. On one side, you'll have Microsoft with their game exclusives. On the other side, you'll have Sony with their game exclusives, right? And everything will be software-based. So who's got the better software?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say where I lie in your prediction because it's your prediction, and that's fine. But yes, I think we covered everything that we possibly could cover at this stage in the announcement phase of the next generation of consoles. So if you have anything to add, you think we're talking nonsense, or you agree and you want to elaborate or talk about it further, do comment below, or if you were listening on a podcast, tweet us at TGS_The Geek Show, Instagram us at TGS_The Geek Show, or Facebook us at TGS.The Geek Show. We couldn't have uniformity there. But until next time, when we are talking about games that we'd like to see return in the next generation, we've already recorded that one, and some pretty wild suggestions and some interesting things that we'd like to see return. One of which we actually talked about before the story started leaking. So we were there first, even though timeline might not suggest it.
Yes.
Until then, thank you very much for watching and or listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.